Hello everyone, welcome to the Lightning Ball channel. If you haven't yet subscribed to my channel, please do so and activate the notification bell. Your support fuels my continued efforts. In our last episode, we discussed how, while Rimuru and Benimaru were leisurely enjoying their meal, their ally Yuki and his companions were being attacked by the forces of the Empire. Moreover, Emperor Rudra and Scorched Dragon Velgrynd themselves had taken personal action to subjugate Yuki. In this episode, we will delve into the fate of the Composite Division and Rudra's ultimate skill, Lord of Justice. Let's get started. As Rimuru and Benimaru were still savoring their meal and enjoying their peaceful daily life, Laplace, in a rush, burst into the dining hall, followed by Vesta, a former subordinate of King Gazel of Dwargan Nation. An emergency situation had arisen, communication with Yuki's side had been severed, and King Gazel had sent an urgent message that Velgrynd had made her appearance in front of the Composite Division, which was staging a fight in Dwargan Nation. Hearing this, Rimuru didn't hesitate for a moment, and immediately convened all members scheduled for deployment. According to Laplace, Kagali and the others had been attacked by Tatsuya Kondou, and Yuki seemed to be in a battle with Damrata, with both sides in a state of emergency. Meanwhile, in Dwargan Nation, Rimuru and his team were able to directly observe the scene through the skill the Eye of God. The scene displayed on the screen turned everyone's faces pale with shock. Standing there was a woman in a Qipao-style military uniform, with pale blue hair and an overwhelming aura. She was Scorched Dragon Velgrynd. Before her, the 60,000 soldiers of the once mighty Composite Division had been transformed into a pillar of red connecting heaven and earth, their spilled blood painting everything within sight a vivid red. This horrific display was the signature move of Primordial Demon Carrera, known as nuclear magic gravity collapse. The situation grew even more dire as Velgrynd demonstrated not just her large-scale nuclear magic but also an astonishing precision that left even Carrera, who prided herself on her nuclear magic, feeling both resentful and helpless. Velgrynd's gravity collapse was so precise that it swept up only the soldiers, leaving not even a grain of sand disturbed, an unbelievable feat that even Carrera couldn't achieve. Rimuru was plunged into deep thought. Could they truly triumph in a battle against such a formidable opponent? At this critical juncture, the Lord of Wisdom suggested that deploying all their forces could offer a chance of victory. However, Rimuru soon noticed something alarming. As the blood sprayed and the bodies piled up, all were drained and stacked in one place. Next to this macabre mountain stood a man in military uniform and another unfamiliar figure, Yuki's deputy, Kagali, the president of the moderate Harlequin Alliance. Laplace urgently pointed out that Kagali seemed to be under Tatsuya Kondou's control. This control referred to mental domination. According to Laplace, the worst part was that neither Tia nor Footman could resist Kagali's influence. The connection Laplace had been maintaining until then had been cut off, likely due to a prohibition order. In fact, Laplace and his fellow jesters were created by Kagali, but only Laplace could defy Kagali's commands. Since most of Yuki's subordinates were marked with a curse, if Kagali was controlled, it meant virtually all of Yuki's forces were under enemy control. Despite being a special race known as Death Men, Laplace and his kin were not spiritual lifeforms, but they possessed an almost undying trait. As long as their astral body remained intact, they could resurrect over a considerable time, even if their physical form perished. This unique race didn't multiply through breeding. Instead, they were created through a forbidden curse known as birthday or mystic dead production. This curse harnessed the resentment accumulated in corpses to create powerful magents, a capability belonging to the sorcery lord Kagali. Thus, jesters like Laplace, Clayman, Footman, and Tia were all creations of Kagali. This very curse had been used in Rimuru's camp as well. Diablo's current body was crafted using the principles of mystic dead production from 20,000 corpses. With 60,000 soldiers in the Composite Division, Kagali couldn't create beings as potent as Diablo but could generate up to 10 entities of Clayman's caliber. These beings could potentially awaken further, evolving into true demon lords like Rimuru, posing a significant threat to Rimuru's side. Assessing the situation, Rimuru realized they had only 2 hours to prevent Kagali and Kondou's plan. He immediately called for his team to prepare for urgent action. However, Laplace seemed hesitant and began reflecting on past events. He admitted the jester's actions had been childish, with only Clayman showing maturity. Yet Clayman's foolishness led to his demise at Rimuru's hands. Laplace believed Rimuru's actions were justified in a world governed by the survival of the fittest. But now, the jesters seemed to be on the weaker side, and Laplace intuitively felt that continuing collaboration with them seemed futile. As Laplace shared these thoughts, he glanced at Benimaru, implying another layer to the survival of the fittest. Rimuru might have killed Clayman, but the jesters had previously led an attack that destroyed the ogre tribe's village. Benimaru responded with composure, stating that while he would never forgive the jesters for destroying his village, they would stand united as long as Rimuru decided to ally with them. His words dispelled Laplace's doubts. Shion, Soyai, and Hakuru also nodded in agreement, ready to bury their grudges for this crucial period. They resolved to face their hatred and fight together. Even the usually carefree Shion speculated that Tatsuya Kondou might be the mastermind behind everything, including controlling Kagali and possibly Clayman. Upon hearing Shion's hypothesis, everyone fell into silence. Considering all the information gathered so far, there seemed to be no element that could refute her speculation. Even the Lord of Wisdom seemed to agree. Benimaru couldn't help but curse aloud at this realization. Rimuru then reminded everyone to stay vigilant to avoid being controlled. With this, Rimuru's team commenced their operation to confront the scorched dragon that had appeared in Dworgen Nation. Primordial White Testarossa broke away from Rimuru's group, teaming up with the other 2 primordial demons, Ultima and Carrera. Soyai stepped in to fill the vacancy left by Testarossa in Rimuru's team. Meanwhile, Vesta raised an alarm. The screen now showed King Geza leading the Pegasus Knights into battle. Witnessing this, Rimuru immediately issued combat orders. The long night continued, and war broke out once again. Rewinding a bit, we switch our perspective to Kagali in the pitch dark, where Kagali, the leader of the moderate Harlequin alliance, was leading a frantic escape with her jesters and Yuki's confidants. They aimed to break out of the imperial capital and regroup with the Composite Division's army. However, Tatsuya Kondou, the head of the Imperial Guardians and the chief of the Imperial Intelligence Bureau, had anticipated this move. He and his subordinates lay in ambush along Kagali's inevitable escape route. One after another, Imperial Guardians descended from the rooftops, surrounding Kagali and her group. Despite the overwhelmingly unfavorable situation, Yuki's subordinates refused to give in. The only option left was to carve out a bloody path and join the larger forces of the Composite Division. Thus, everyone present plunged into battle, with the jester's footman, Tia, and Kagali confronting Kondou directly. Kondou sighed, unwilling to kill them but needing to neutralize their fighting capabilities. He put away his pistol, instead gripping a Japanese military katana with both hands. Seeing Kondou's resolve, Footman didn't hold back either. He quickly rotated his rotund body, building up fierce fighting spirit. Footman bounced agilely around Kondou, accelerating gradually, using himself as a massive bullet for a swift assault. Footman unleashed one of his hidden techniques, Angry Explosion Splash. Reaching peak velocity, he zoomed towards Kondou. However, Kondou, unfazed, brandished his katana and executed a single strike, thunder of heaven and earth. In a flash of the blade, Footman's arms and legs were severed, leaving his head attached to his torso. Shocked, Footman's body began spewing blood, unable to support itself, and he collapsed to the ground. Kondou, though, made it clear he had no intention of killing anyone, as they still had value to him. He even instructed Tia to provide first aid to Footman. Kondou emphasized Kagali's potential usefulness. Enraged, Kagali declared she would never submit. Kondou calmly mentioned his ability to control others and, with a slight smirk, his pistol began to glow red. At this moment, Kagali realized her only choice to prevent herself from being controlled and harming her allies was to take her own life. But Kondou, anticipating this, cryptically remarked on Deathman's ability to survive without a physical body. Kagali, now panicked, questioned how Kondou knew such a secret. He coolly replied that mastering all intelligence can end battles even before they begin. He expressed disappointment in Clayman, who had squandered a perfect opportunity set up for him, only to lose to a new demon lord Rimuru, who Kondou found more intriguing. Kagali's fury reached its peak, unable to forgive her enemy. Her intense desire to kill Tatsuya Kondou surged within her. Tragically, this was precisely Kondou's aim. Mocking Kagali's emotional response, he pulled the trigger, and Kagali's body twitched. By the time she realized what had happened, she was already incapable of defying Kondou. It was one of Kondou's trump cards, the Dominion Bullet. It had the ability to control others, as demonstrated on Damrata. Its limitation was that it could only control one person at a time and required specific conditions, such as, to be effective against Demon Lord level opponents, the target needs to be asleep or emotionally vulnerable. Kagali's outburst of anger created the perfect opportunity for Kondou to use it on her. Following this, Velgrind's swift action led to the annihilation of the Composite Division's 60,000 soldiers, creating the horrific scene Rimuru witnessed on the screen. Now let's shift to Yuki's perspective, as he confronted the formidable Emperor Rudra and Marshal Velgrynd. After enduring a severe humiliation from them, Yuki realized that escape was not an option and decided to stand his ground and fight back. With a defiant declaration, he challenged them to demonstrate the strength necessary to subjugate him. Yuki then activated his ultimate skill, Lord of Greed, converting his own desires into raw power and launching an aggressive assault on Rudra. Yuki employed his unique skill, Steal Life, which simultaneously used his anti-skill in his right hand and the Absorb Life ability from Lord of Greed. This combination created an attack that theoretically could not be defended against, as it combined both defense-breaking and magic-draining aspects. Should his opponent survive the initial assault, Yuki planned to activate another ability, Control Heart, with his left hand. This ability aimed to manipulate the opponent's emotions, effectively gaining control over them. This strategy highlighted Yuki's genius, demonstrating his ability to adeptly integrate and optimize his inherent skills with the capabilities of Lord of Greed. However, Yuki's attack was effortlessly blocked before reaching Rudra. Velgrynd intervened with such speed that Yuki couldn't react, deflecting his right hand. A massive energy surge flowed into Yuki's hand, assaulting his body like a toxin. Yuki managed to distance himself just in time, otherwise, the overwhelming energy could have been fatal. Despite losing a significant amount of energy to Yuki's attack, Velgrynd appeared unaffected, demonstrating an almost dismissive stance towards such assaults. Yuki was taken aback, quickly twisting his body to create distance between himself and Velgrynd. To put it simply, although his Steal Life attack was repelled, it did have an effect. However, this led to Yuki absorbing an amount of energy from Velgrynd that far exceeded his own limit. Had he not disengaged promptly, he might have been overwhelmed and burst by the sheer force of the energy. On the other hand, despite having a substantial amount of energy taken from her, Velgrynd stood as if nothing had happened, almost as if to say that such an attack didn't even warrant a defense. Yuki realized the immense gap between himself and Velgrynd, shaken by the overwhelming power of the true dragons. This was the second time since his encounter with Gi that Yuki felt the despairing difference between himself and the pinnacle of power in the world. However, Rudra, seemingly amused, declared his readiness to personally engage in battle, suggesting Yuki experience his power firsthand. Both Rudra and Velgrynd maintained a relaxed demeanor, almost as if they were advising Yuki to surrender promptly. But Yuki was far from giving up. He mustered his courage, glaring fiercely at Rudra, declaring that despite the clear disparity in strength, he would not concede easily. Aware that his chances of victory were virtually non-existent, and that his defiance was merely a matter of pride, Yuki still chose to stand his ground, preferring a dignified resistance that might provoke his opponents. Rudra responded to Yuki's defiance with a smile, volunteering himself as Yuki's adversary. He informed Yuki that his specialty was domination and proposed a challenge. If Yuki could withstand Rudra power, Yuki would be considered the victor and granted his freedom to do as he pleased. Rudra gazed earnestly at Yuki, his heart exhilarated by the prospect of a rare battle. He was aware of the risks involved in losing, potentially releasing a dangerous enemy, but he was indifferent. He reasoned that if he were defeated, it simply meant his reign was not as formidable as he had thought, and he deserved to lose. On the other side, Yuki felt a surge of excitement at Rudra's decision. His own forte was also domination, and Rudra's choice not to employ other tactics seemingly increased his chances of success. Rudra calmly revealed that he had just received information that the moderate Harlequin alliance had fallen into his hands, and that he was fully apprised of Yuki's affairs. He invited Yuki to challenge him with this awareness in mind. Yuki, seizing on Rudra's overconfidence as his potential downfall, realized that with his allies already subdued, there was only one strategy left. Placing all his bets on this single approach, Yuki boldly initiated his challenge against Rudra. With a slight smile, Rudra swiftly closed the distance between himself and Yuki. Then, his ability Regalia Dominion activated, embodying the essence of his ultimate skill, Lord of Justice. This power, capable of compelling anyone's obedience, ranks among the most elite even within the realm of ultimate skills. Yuki, having only recently awakened his ultimate skill, Lord of Greed, was utterly defenseless against it. Within moments, he collapsed to the ground, clearly defeated. Rudra watched with a composed demeanor, the outcome of their confrontation evident. Velgrynd remarked that someone like Yuki would only feign submission before retaliating, suggesting that eliminating him might be the safer course. However, Rudra laughed fearlessly, relishing the thrill of the situation. He then turned his attention to Dhamrata, apologizing that he still needed him to refrain from interfering with his plans. Dhamrata respectfully acknowledged his emperor's wishes. Thus, Yuki's forces were decimated, except for Laplace, who was away on a mission. The scene shifted back to Rimuru and his group. After teleporting Gabiru and his team to the Dwargan nation's battlefield, Rimuru and 4 of his subordinates, accompanied by Laplace, teleported to the imperial capital. However, upon arrival, Laplace's excitement quickly turned to anxiety. They found themselves in an unfamiliar environment. Laplace apologized profusely, insisting such a mishap had never occurred before and appeared genuinely perplexed. Rimuru surveyed the surroundings, finding themselves in a spacious hall with an opulent carpet leading forward. At the end of the carpet sat a figure on an extravagant chair, flanked by a woman with blue hair exuding an overwhelming presence, with the faint sense of dozens more nearby. Indeed, the woman was Velgrynd. But how could she be here when she had just been on the battlefield in Dwargan Nation? Nobody knew. The only certainty was that Rimuru and his companions had walked into a trap. Alright, that's all for this video. In the next episode, we will witness Rimuru's first direct confrontation with Emperor Rudra and engage in a fierce debate. Veldora also fell under the Emperor's control. The next installment promises to be a tense and thrilling episode. If you enjoyed this video, please like, comment, and subscribe. Your support is greatly appreciated. See you in the next one.